listening to Filling the Storehouse podcast. I'm David.
And I'm Stuart. And we want to walk with you on the journey to living the abundant life through faith, family, and freedom. Our goal is to refine our why while helping you find yours. Together, achieve our best and highest purpose. In the end, we'll drive each other to intentionally fill our storehouse. Storehouse listeners, what's up? This is Stu. Hey, before we get into this episode, I have one favor to ask of you. Go find our Facebook group. It's called Filling the Storehouse Podcast Facebook group, and join us. We're trying to grow the community, grow the tribe, to promote abundance and service and giving, and just share lots of cool stuff with you. We post clips from our podcast episodes, good books we're reading, information on our guests, previous guests, blog posts, just some cool, funny pictures, just lots of good stuff going on in our Facebook group. So we'd love for you to join us and tell someone else about us. We'd really greatly appreciate it. And go fill your storehouse. Make it a great day.
See you.
All right, David, are you sure you're still ready? I know you say you're going to be born ready, but are you sure?
No, I never said I was going to be born ready. I was previously born at that point.
You're going to
I was born ready.
Yeah.
And I would just simply say I apologize to our guest, Dan Rockwell. Super excited to have you here. I want to apologize beforehand. I typically do this with most of our guests. Stuart's questions are about on par with what he just did. So
yes, I like to pre-apologize too. I generally do a lot of that. I stand up before a presentation. I just want to apologize right now for everybody I offend. Let's just get this out of the way.
Let's just get this out of the way now. Well, we're going to be talking about leadership, something that David needs a lot of. He did run an organization. We were both leaders in the military, but I think there's always lessons to be learned and always becoming better as a leader. So I'm excited about this conversation. Dan, we were connected by our other friend, John David Mann. And yeah, let's get into this. If you don't mind, if you could just kind of give a background of who you are and what you do for a living for our audience, for our listeners.
Sure. I basically play for a living. Who I am is, you're always who you were when you were 13. And when I was 13, I was on a dairy farm. I was brought up on a dairy farm in central Maine. And even though I haven't milked a cow for I don't know how many decades, I still think I'm a farm boy from Maine. And I like to think of myself that way. And so don't burst my bubble. And I make a living by workshops and presentations to conferences and groups, and writing and coaching.
And you have this heavy focus on leadership, whether it's your blog or which Leadership Freak. Anybody look up Leadership Freak, you're going to find Dan. But what brought this passion for leadership? What is, why is that such a focus for you?
Well, they say you should write about what you know, but I decided to write about what I didn't know. And I've been doing that ever since, really. I mean, I never lacked for a sense of confidence. But I found out as years went by that I was not nearly as good a leader as I thought. Then I got my MBA late in life, kind of a slow bloomer, I guess. And I got really interested in organizational development and leadership and those kind of things. And then one day I just started writing. No big plan.
Don't worry, Dave. Don't worry. Dave is also a late bloomer. He's still got some years to go on that, so it's okay.
All of our children were like toe-headed. They had no hair when they were little. So
yeah, I've not even started growing hair yet. So there you go.
So we had connected earlier, just to kind of discuss where this podcast was going to go, and I'm curious, you would kind of explain to us, one, why the blog, and you had set a specific goal on writing of, I was going to write every day, I was going to write 300 words, and I was going to end with a product. And I'm curious kind of where you got that from and why.
I guess ignorance is bliss, Stu. That's
Okay.
all I can tell you because, I was afraid. I wanted to matter more. I evaluated my life. I had a midlife. I've had many midlife crises. I think we should have a lot of them. And this was again, approximately on the decade markers. We tend to have them. You go off to college when you're 18. There's a crisis, right?
Yeah.
Somewhere in there, 10 years later, maybe you get married or you have a kid. There's a crisis. Anyway, have lots of them. And so it was the initial motivation for Leadership Freak was a desire to matter more, the fear that I was missing some of the things that I could be doing. But I had no idea what it meant. I just started writing. I made a commitment to myself to write 5 days a week for a year. I had no idea what that meant. I mean, like none. I had written contracts at the college where I worked. I had done papers for school, but I had never really written like that. And so, but I just started and said to myself, look, if this thing gets traction, then I'm going to stick with it. And it was a matter of months. And I had, subscribers from 11 or 12 different countries. And
Wow.
I was getting contacted by book publishers. And it's like, don't ask me, for the formula on how to make that happen. I have no idea.
That's
Awesome.
incredible. And I think, and I want to go back to something you said, ignorance is bliss. I think that's really why Stu is always so happy, because he just lives in that constant state of ignorance. But I think I'm intrigued by this idea because we love taking action. We're for good or bad, we're action takers. And I love the idea that you didn't have this well-crafted business plan that had a 30 day, a 90 day, 1 year, 3 year, 10 year, and this is where blah blah blah. You just did. And I think there's two elements of this and if you could touch on them, because I'm kind of curious on the bigger story. You're my understanding, teaching, and then you start doing this thing, and then it's kind of taken its life of its own and led you to other opportunities. So if you don't mind kind of breaking that down for us. But also what sticks out to me is you took action and had a desire to add value. And those two things as a focus drove you to do something. And then that something has turned into this incredible platform and opportunities that you have. So I guess multi-pronged, that I'm curious if you could touch on those two things, but then also your thoughts on that, but then also kind of how that practically took you from whatever specifically you're doing to what you're, specifically doing now.
Okay, so I can't remember all of that, but I'm going to start talking anyway, and then you can just help me out as we move through this. But we like to say in our house, get or did. So we got to get or did. Go do something, even if it's a wrong thing, as long as it's not going to harm, right? I mean, you generally know if you're causing harm. So don't set out to cause harm, set out to do good. But here's the truth of it, right? Sometimes you set out to do good and you screw up. You don't really do that much good. So that's when you have to adapt. I haven't always been great at adapting. I'm the kind of person that, you get on the bike and if things aren't working, you just grip the handlebars more firmly and you just pedal faster. And somehow the magic fairy dust will fall out of the skies and make what isn't working magically start working. So if you're a get or did sort of person, I think it really helps to be a person who is also willing to evaluate and adapt. So if you look at what's going on and say, oh, that's not exactly working, is it? And that can be harder than you think, right? Because we tie our personality to our actions, and then we judge ourselves. So the action didn't work, I'm a lousy person. I got a thing in my ear. I got a voice in my ear that says, loser, you're a loser. And if anybody ever found out the truth about you, then, they would never read anything you ever wrote again. So if you have to be careful that you don't get so tied to the thing that you're trying to deliver that it becomes who you are. But you want to allow what you're delivering to express what's in your heart, right? And then sometimes, it's been a real learning curve as far as writing and, trying to do something useful every day. But, and I'm still really learning that too. So I guess that's the idea of, I just started writing. That was kind of a long answer. I just started writing, and thankfully it did get traction. 300 words. I have a short attention span. I wrote, the length suits me. So in one sense, I write, not in one sense, I do write for myself. I put on the page what I like to see. I don't want to read these long articles that don't have headings. And, I want you as a reader to drop into Leadership Freak. And this is what you're going to do. Unless you're just a longtime reader and you're just committed to read. You're going to scan the page. It's exactly what I do when I go to a web page. I scan that page. Why am I doing that? I'm doing that to determine if I want to read it, if I'm interested, if I think it's going to be useful. So what I'm trying to do with my readers is help them make that decision very quickly. I want them to be able to scan the page and say, well, that looks like it might be applicable. That looks like it might be useful. Then they'll go back to the top and they'll start reading. I also want them to read it over and say, well, I'm not there. That's not what's going on in my world. That's not really that relevant. And then I just want them to go somewhere else, because my goal is to have your time be used usefully. So if you don't find something useful, then I don't want you. I'm not trying to entice you. Click on this, click on that, go buy this, go. You know what I mean? Just make it useful. So for me, and I don't know what the statistics are, but for me, my average viewer, I'm going to get 1.4 clicks from. So I'm fine with that. I don't need you to click on 5 different things. I just, get your value and go get her bid.
Yeah, I'm not your. I think you got like 85 clicks from me on one article times every article I read. So I'm bumping your numbers. And I guess the second part of that is, if you don't mind, because this idea of transitioning from one thing to another and the scariness of that, could you tell us what you were doing when you started this? So you were teaching, or you had a W-2 or something very stable, or whatever that would look like, and then what it has transitioned into.
Sure. So I was working at Penn State affiliate here locally. I was handling workforce development. I was, and that meant community education. If you were a company that wanted to train some of your employees, on software in particular, or the internet, it was back in the day, man, we had classes on how to use Netscape Navigator.
Nice.
So anyway, we were doing workforce development, we were doing community ed. I was handling staff development for the college, and had some computer labs, and did some other things there. So that was where I was at. So I did have a great platform, and I also pretty much ran my own life within the organization. So I was able to focus on the things that made the most sense. I was responsible to generate income. It wasn't the same as the credit side of the house, but so I was able to explore things that were interesting to me, and it was a wonderful engagement. I don't know, it's over 15 years. And I started writing when I was at the college. And there came a point where they said to me, Dan, you really have to make a choice. I probably would have continued on, sort of like in all these different worlds. And, so it was a no-brainer for me to kind of transition out. But honestly, we did not think about making money. I did it because I wanted to make a difference. And it was a year and a half. And I got my first invitation to do a presentation, and I didn't really, I'd given presentations before, but I didn't really anticipate that. And I came home, and I remember telling my wife, hey, we can make money doing this. And she laughed. It's like, so you just had no idea.
Big supporter.
Yeah. Well, no, she is. She's
I know
awesome.
it.
She's awesome. But If we talk about humility, I got another laugh story for you. So anyway, that's when that first thing came out. A little bit later on, I was approached by a Canadian who is one of the top coaches in Canada. He said, "Dan, would you like to be coached?" I said, "Nah." And he was humble and persistent, and and eventually we did connect, and he mentored me and taught me, and we actually then taught some classes on coaching, and so my offerings of presentations and workshops, I was already doing some of that at the college, and then the coaching thing came about because of a wonderful person who really worked. I make it sad. I tell people, look, if you're a friend of mine, you probably had to work hard to get there, because I'm just a social pygmy, and no offense to pygmies. But anyway, he was very humble, and he worked at it. And now we coach each other to this day. We still have a couple of calls a month. And we have in the past worked together with clients and, done training and things like that together too.
And so I'm curious, you said earlier that, you started writing this blog and you had no plan or no way of, hoping for success.
That sounds rather pathetic, doesn't it?
And, there's no formula, right? There's no magic formula. But I feel like there is, in a way. And I'm curious how blogging and just writing just to write on leadership.
Yes.
Goes from you just doing it because you made a goal for yourself to now making a career out of writing a blog. So what part of that formula is income producing? Does a free blog on a site turn to speaking engagements, workshops, coaching? Like, how did that all kind of come together?
The answer to your question is yes.
Yeah.
I mean, I did not know what content marketing was.
Yeah.
Content marketing, right, is that you put out content for people, and then they connect with it, and then they think, well, gee. And I have literally had people call me. I had a consulting firm call me from Philadelphia and say, Dan, we all read your stuff. We love it. We don't know what we could do together, but there must be something we could do together. Could you come down? Let's just talk about it. And that was an engagement that lasted 2 or 3 years with wonderful, smart people. And, so I've had actually people contact me because I don't put a lot. And now I put a banner at the bottom. I do presentations or some sort of coaching testimonial. But I actually have people contact me and say, I'm working right now with a huge company, and guy contacted me probably 3 years ago. It was just before COVID, or just as COVID was hitting, I guess, so maybe 2 years ago. And he said, let's do something. Let's talk about what can we do together. And it's like, how do you, pinch me, somebody. It's like crazy. So Stu,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm going to stop here, but I definitely have developed over time a pattern for what goes on the page that, I know, David, you're thinking about, writing and content and all that. And so we can do that, but I'll stop there because I don't know if you want to follow up on that.
Yeah, no, that would be great. I mean, I just noticed that, that on your blog page, there's not many, advertising and Google ads and, all these other like sales pitches, if you will, to get you somewhere else, to get to a sale. And so that's kind of where I was going is, how do you do a free blog and then make money at it? And, I'd love to hear, more about where you were going.
Yeah. So by the way, I suppose it helps to not set out to make money. So far
you won't be disappointed, right?
I have so far gone beyond my expectations. Yeah. It's unbelievable.
That's awesome.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that goes back to, I was just thinking about this morning, and I, a lot of times my brain just goes nuts, and I think about things like the podcast and where we want it to go. And And I think it goes back to the idea of adding value. I think that's the key, is that, if your main goal is not to tie a number to the value that you add, and recognizing that the value you add will never, because quite frankly, there's probably multiple zeros that you could add to what you've been paid for the value that has been delivered to people you don't even know, right? Like, you have no idea that I clicked 8,300 times through your articles because it took me down these rabbit holes that were extremely enriching. Not only the content, I'm super passionate about leadership, so I love the content, but just the resources. And then what it did to my brain, like, I had a notepad out, I'm reading your stuff, I have a notepad out, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is, it brings back memories. It does so much stuff, and you can't really add a number. I mean, I'm sure, you'd love me to write you a check and you can name the price, but I think there's that element of adding value will at some point, come back and reward you, whatever that looks like. And so I just want to also encourage you that there's probably a ton of people like Stu and I out there that are just enriching our lives based on the things that you're putting on paper, 300 words at a time, which is incredible.
Yeah. Well, thank you for saying that. And I certainly hope that is true. I don't think the goal is to extract as much out of people as you possibly can, right? I think it's to pour as much as you can into people. And some of them respond, and some of them are able to respond, right? They lead teams, they lead organizations, and they're able to, and they connect. And it took me a long time also to learn the value of, like, kind of nurturing those relationships and paying attention to people who seem to really connect strongly, and encouraging them and connecting with them when possible. When someone comes up to me after a presentation, when one person comes up to me after a presentation to 5,000 and says, can I, have a picture with you? I get their email. I talk to them. I send them a note. That, and I don't, again, you have to be careful. It is not to, like, okay, this is a cheesy way to get a client. That cannot be top of mind. But sometimes it happens that way. I had a guy send me a note on LinkedIn. He said, man, you write about energy. He said, man, I don't know what's going on with me. I am just not hardly able to get out of bed anymore. And he's got a lot of responsibility, and et cetera, et cetera. Well, I feel that. So I just sent him a note and said, look, how about we just have a call? How about we get together? And I just want you to know, this is not a cheesy way to get a client. And, so we've had a few conversations. We text once in a while. There's no business. Maybe there will be someday. Maybe there won't. It's fine.
But I think that's very evident, and it's very transparent. I think when people talk to people that genuinely want to add value to others, it's readily apparent that you're like, yeah, it just is. It's not even a thought, right? Like, it's not even a thought. Well, Dan is trying to, and when the, conversely, when the other side of that coin is true, it is very apparent. And you can tell that somebody just wants to, and Stu and I are intentional. Like, I don't even want that person on the show because I don't, it's not where we want to be. And so I think that in and of itself is a huge leadership trait, which I'm sure, and you've probably addressed that as well. And you're on, an agenda-free leadership that, I'll find that article. I know it's out there.
5 ways to be a leader, agenda-free.
Yeah. I love it. Hey, I should write that down.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's that outward facing formula. It's you're always you outward to try to create value and help other people. And I think there's something in the Bible about that too, right? About, you give and then you shall receive what you put out to the world. Speaking of energy, and managing energy, you write a lot about that, managing personal energy, and how to energize your day, how to energize your team, how to, perform self-care. I'm curious why such a focus in that area, over time here with your blog.
You know, what's interesting, Stu, it's a good question. And sometimes I'll go back. And by the way, I hate going back. You know what I mean? But I'll make myself go back and look at some of that other stuff. I hardly remember what I wrote about today
Yeah.
because I'm thinking about what I want to write about tomorrow.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I let that go. I don't think about it. I'm not trying to, but anyway, it did start bubbling up. And perhaps because so many teams and leaders grapple with this issue and they're burning the candle at both ends, and they wake up tired and they're pushing themselves, and the confusion of busyness versus productivity, and the stresses of urgencies that we think are important but aren't really important. We check off a few things here, and all of a sudden the whole day is checking off a few small things, and we never really get to those meaningful things. So it just really did bubble up as something that was important to me personally. And then I think my audience tends to respond to this as well, because they're like trying to find some gas for the tank, man.
Well, and I think as leaders, and if you are in a position where you have that mindset of pouring out to others and serving others, a lot of times you serve others so much that you don't serve yourself ever, and that could also be detrimental to your personal health, to your team health. I think a lot of people, a lot of like who they see as a leader, in the community, a lot of times they don't perform self-care. They don't think about themselves at all.
Yeah, well, self-care, that's for weaklings,
Yeah,
that.
right. Yeah,
us Maine boys, and again, I haven't lived in Maine in decades, but hey, yeah. us dairy farmers.
But even like a mom, I'm thinking about my wife. She pours into our family all day long and serves our kids, and serves me in our house, and does the laundry and cooks the meals and all this stuff. But when does she like serve herself? And I think it could be a challenge.
It is. And there's an interesting thing here about this. And there are some things that you do that give you energy. And that's really, and it's important to notice your own energy. When are you at your best? Is it in the morning? Is it in the afternoon? When are you at your best? Because that's when you need to do your most important work. But you also need to notice what's sucking the life out of you. So I coach a leader, one of the leaders I coach, and it happened that I had a coaching call with him after he had 2 one-on-ones in a row with his team members. And he said, Dan, I can't believe what I'm noticing here. So I had this one call. When it was all over, it was like it just sucked the life out of me. I had this other call, and when I got done, I'm excited, I'm energized, I'm ready to go. Well, he's on a wonderful path. And this path of noticing your energy and noticing the team's energy, noticing what gives you energy, noticing what sucks the life out of you, so that you can then navigate that kind of life. So we have to be careful. I started this, and I think there are 2 things here, and so it's sort of a shotgun blast. But some of the things we do give us energy, but there's a limit to that, right? So doing good to people is very energizing, but you can't. The law of energy is very simple, and that is you cannot pour out more than you pour in over the long haul. You can do it temporarily because you have some reserves, but over the long haul, you never can pour out more than you pour in. So for mom, or for a leader, or for each of us, we have to find those things that put gas back in the tank. Apart from, everybody would talk about food, good food and exercise and some rest. Those things are given, but I think there are other things that pour energy into the tank, and we need to find ways to dip our toe there too.
Yeah, and I think that's perfect segue into this question I have for you is practical application. right? And who better to ask about the practical ways that you do self-care than the leadership freak. So I'm just curious, what are the ways that you personally, because I think a lot of our listeners are these very driven, a lot of them are service oriented individuals in leadership positions, and there's it's a double-edged sword, right? We preach self-care, but then our people that we're leading see us working or burning the candle on both ends, and we're not setting the example of self-care, which in and of itself is a form of leadership. Leading by example. So I'm curious, how do you perform self-care?
Yeah, that's awesome. A great day begins the night before, obviously. And so I tend to go to bed early because I like to get up early. And I know that my best time is in the morning. In the wintertime, it's still dark, and I'm totally great with that. I actually like the feeling of a small space and no one is there and it's quiet. And so I try to go to bed early, and all of the things that you would expect with that too, David, like, don't drink alcohol, at night, and don't overeat, and those kinds of things. Everybody, that's all. But anyway, go to bed, and when you get up, I get up. I don't have to decide what I'm going to do every morning. So I'm going to do the most meaningful thing that I can think of, apart from relationships. I'm going to do the most meaningful thing I can think of when I'm at my best, and that's in the morning, and that's writing. So I'm going to get up. I'm going to get my hands on the keyboard. Sometimes I will have started something the night before. Sometimes I'm not sure what I want to write, so I think about what I'm mad about. Sometimes whatever. I might have to read something. I'm gonna get the juices flowing, and after a while, I've done it so long that when I don't do that, I mean, it's like my fingers start feeling like something's wrong. You know what I mean? It's like, what's going on here? We're supposed to be thinking about ideas. And so that gives me energy, but it also, I'll give you a couple of very practical things. Set out to do one meaningful thing every day beyond your day-to-day. So you got day-to-day things. You got to answer email. You got to do phone calls. You have to do this. You have a team you're responsible for, whatever it is. You have these day-to-day things. Set out every day to do one meaningful thing, which leads me to say the second thing is, can those long to-do lists, for crying out loud. If you are making a to-do list and then most of those items go into tomorrow, that is a huge mistake. That's just 1,000 dripping faucets in your life, right? So make a short to-do list. I said I was at an offsite with a dozen leaders, corporate leaders, and I said, if you are not regularly finishing your to-do list, you need to learn how to make a to-do list because you're failing, right? You got to do that. Make a to-do list you can complete in a day because it's energizing to finish stuff. So you got to have I think a short to-do list, which I think the other thing about managing personal energy is learn to eliminate stuff. Learn, cut stuff. It's not necessary. I don't need that. We don't need to do that. The question a team sometimes needs to hear is, what can we stop doing? I love to start doing things. And the leaders I work with, they love to start doing things. They just do. They just, because let's go, let's try this, let's do this, that's the kind of people they are. But their downside of that is fatigue. And so learn what's important to you, find the courage to say no to things. And I think energy starts to come up when you do the regular stuff, rest and all of that stuff. You do some things that are meaningful, stop doing things that aren't meaningful, and the energy starts to rise up a bit.
So you're saying that if I have a list of like 40 things that have been on there for a long, long time, just delete them and just realize that I'm
throw
never
that
gonna
list
get back.
away.
Yeah.
Forget about it.
Yeah.
Forget about it. I actually had a leader
Need to
tell
do
me
that.
back in the day, they would print, he said, I would print out these emails and put them in a box. And then every time I looked at them, I'd put a little check at the top. And he said, one day my boss came in, he looked at my thing and he thumbed through, and they all had like 2 or 3 little check marks on them. He took that whole pile, threw it in the garbage. He said, stop that. Forget it.
Yeah.
You know, just deal with it. Or
I have a problem with, so I took the Gallup Strengths Finder test, and my top strength was I'm an achiever. I like to achieve things, and I'm a checklist guy. I'm an engineer. I'm a numbers guy. I'm a pilot, and I have a checklist, and I would do something that wasn't on my checklist, and I'd go back and I'd write it on there and create a little box so I could check it, just to like feel good about checking off something that I did.
That sounds exhausting.
Actually, you know, checking off is energizing, right? I mean, it feels good.
Yeah, I'm an achiever.
The problem is, and I do this too, I think most of us do. For example, I sometimes will set aside a certain amount of time to go, you know, you got to run errands, you're going to do this, you do that. You get one done, now you're excited to get the next one done. And it's like, you know, and it's like a squirrel on an exercise cage, you know?
Right.
And some of that is fine. I mean, it works, but the daily pattern of like finishing what you set out to do. So when you put your head on the pillow, sure, you got tomorrow's list, you got other things. There's always more to do.
Yeah.
Don't worry about that.
Yeah. I'm curious also. So one of the books I read that made a pretty good impact on me was a book called A Road Less Stupid. And I don't know if you've read it, but it's he talks a lot about thinking time. And so I'm curious, you know, when you're writing these blogs, kind of a 2-part question. Are you spending thinking time where it's intentional of, hey, I'm going to put everything away and I'm just going to dedicate 30 minutes, an hour, whatever that is, and just think and, you know, ask yourself questions and write down stuff. Is that a part of your writing process? And second question to that is, how often are you reading in order to prepare for your writing?
Right. So I'll answer the first.
Okay.
The last first, and that is lots of reading. I get lots of books, although I've given myself permission to start a book and not finish it.
Nice.
All right. So that's just the bottom line. Some of the books I get are boring, and I don't want to read them. And I read somewhere that Bill Gates, you know, every book he starts, he finishes. Then I think, well, be careful what books you start. That's all I can say.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's great advice.
It is good advice.
So I do, you know, another thing that on this note, Stu, that kind of speaks to energy is, I didn't know this when I began, but the conversations I have with people like you, conversations I have with leaders are very enriching and energizing to me. So their think time, I'm my own favorite company. I'm glad to spend time with myself. And I'm just going to bring up, just to let you know, because I do this all the time, although I seldom go back. I'm going to try to, even this week, to do it, but I keep a folder. And when I have an idea, I just write it down. So here are what in my folder of potential posts that I put there. What's today? I put these here today, 5/18. Seduced by success. How to inspire people, which is kind of dull, but I read an article about the key concept of what it takes to inspire people, and that got me going. How a good thing becomes a bad thing. How to choose criticisms that matter. And then the last one is choose your win in the morning. So I have these potential, and there's another one, it's just titled Conflict, and it's like the 7 flavors of conflict or something like that. I don't know how many of them will actually ever get on the blog, but I'd never have lacked for ideas, you know, and I think part of that is goofing off is awesome, right? I want to sit on the back deck and have breakfast with my wife and not have an appointment until, 9 or 10 o'clock, and, just sit out there and let the sun, warm me, and, keep a little notepad and don't worry about it and watch the birds. And, that I want to do that. It's so powerful. These lives, a life that is scheduled all out and it has no goofing off time is, that's a sad life. It works for a while, but it just in the long haul, it's self-defeating.
Yeah. David and I have been really intentional lately of like, scheduling, if you will, but scheduling fun time, we're going to put a day on our calendar where we're going to go have fun, and we're going to go do things with our wife, and, we're going to go to the mountains and play, and, same as like goofing off time. I think it's great.
Yes, absolutely. Before COVID hit, I said to my wife, look, we keep talking, we're going to do this. We want to go into New York City and see a show. We want to do this, but things come up. So this is the deal. We're going to schedule once a month some sort of thing. We're going to go to New York City and see a play. We're going to see a concert. We're going to do this once a month. And then of course COVID hit, and that was, but I'm a huge fan of put it on your calendar, man. Put it on your calendar.
Yeah. Someone else, a guy that I was talking to last weekend at a retreat, mastermind retreat, said that he actually has another separate bank account, and he identifies a certain percentage of money from his income that he puts into his fun pot. Like he has a fun bank account where he's just like, I'm going to take 10% from this income stream, and it's going to go towards fun every month. And I was like, I love that. That's
awesome. Cool. I love that idea.
Yeah. David, I know you had a burning question.
Go. No, I just think it's really, I don't want to lose that point that, not only do you build it, some of us have to build it into our calendars because we have to see it. We're visual and we're checklist kind of guys. And that's going to feed us to check that off the block, but also feed us to do something fun. But I think so many of us, especially leaders, when you think of how you ideally want to lead, and the people, if as a leader, you would hopefully love to have people that at least look to you for that guidance, leadership, mentorship. And you think about their lives and what you want for them. And you want them to enjoy leisure. You want them to enjoy their family. You want them to be outside of the workplace. You want them to be physically fit. You want all these things from them, to sleep well, eat well, all these things. But yet we don't want it bad enough for ourselves, I think is a very intriguing, because I believe if you want it bad enough for yourself, then you'll do it. And so I think the idea of stepping back and really owning that is such an important thing to do for a leader, because I think a lot of us will find there's a substantial disconnect between what we do in our lives and the outcomes that will inevitably be versus what we desire for those that work for us or that we lead or that we want to influence. And I think taking a self-assessment is a very important tool to be self-aware enough to acknowledge that difference and that disparity.
Yeah. Love what you're saying, David. And I think it's true. I don't know who said it, but when you're giving advice, to yourself, treat yourself like you were one of your friends. Treat yourself like you were one of the people on your team, right? Because I have had employees come to me and say, I know if I went to the boss and said, this is going on, this is going on, this is going on, the boss would look at me and say, how can I help? And maybe you need to, take a day off. You know what I mean? They immediately start to nurture other people. But it feels awkward. Self-nurture, self-care, all of those things, to me, they feel awkward, and they shouldn't, because I want to have a long-term impact in the world. But so overcoming that, you're helping me even today. So I can say it again. Hello, I'm Dan, and I don't believe in self-care.
I'll tell you, I'm starting to get really used to it. But it's not. I think what's interesting is for Stu and I, it's very much driven towards we have fun hiking 7 miles in a mountain. Well, there are benefits to that are, far surpass the fun element, whether it's physically, physical fitness, us bouncing ideas off each other for our businesses, nurturing our friendship. And my wife do the same, right? My wife and I, these hikes that we do are beautiful relationship builders while we're doing something we enjoy. And so I think there's so many tangential benefits to these activities, but you have to do it. You have to do it. And sometimes that means you got to put on your calendar first, schedule it in, and then and go get after it. Yeah, be a leader, wonderful. Be an example.
Wonderful.
I love it.
Thanks for saying it.
That's great.
I've found a lot of times that I've learned best, from the bad leaders. The leaders that have come into my life that I didn't want to be like, that I didn't want to emulate and follow. And I'm curious if you've gotten any ideas and blog posts and things that you're writing about from bad leadership, from people that have come into your life, or things that you've seen or read about, that are like, oh man, I would never want to do that. Or I'm just curious.
I love the enemy. I love to have an enemy, something to fight against. It's like, don't want to be that, don't like that. And so I hear you, man. That's that, and it is true. Don't tell anybody this, but sometimes I will have encountered someone that I think is not really a good leader. That's just, being kind, but not really a good leader. And it makes me mad. And anger for me is energy, not seething, stewing anger kind of stuff, but just frustration about how this leader is making other people suffer, and it's like, it just drives me nuts. So I love to write angry, and that's fuel for me. But it's I have to, you learn. You don't put your rage on the page, right? You put your solution to those things on the page. And we learn so much from not just other people who do stupid things, but the stupid things we do,
That's a good point. David has a lot of those.
Yeah. So, and it's, to this point of self-care and energy. People often ask, one of the typical questions is, what would you tell your younger self? And my typical response to that is, it really wouldn't matter what I tell my younger self. He wouldn't listen anyway. Yeah. And, that's the truth of it. But if I could get through to my younger self, I would say today, if I could say one thing, get more help, get more people in your life. Let people help you, because when you're young and full of piss and vinegar, it's like everything you do is, you do everything, and, you're the center and blah, 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 and all of that. And a little bit of that is helpful. But I would just say, I have had so many people who I think wanted to be useful to me and helpful to me. And I had no time for that bull crap. Right. It was like, so get help. Yeah.
My 4-year-old boy he wants to do everything himself right now. Like,
yeah. Well, there's something there for you too, though, Stu. Yeah. And that is, if your 4-year-old, for the tie the shoe illustration, yeah. And teach you how to tie their shoe, and they're frustrated, and you reach in to help them, and they say, I'll do it myself.
I can do it. Yeah.
But if you let them try long enough, one, they may succeed and develop self-confidence, or two, they may get to the point where they're frustrated and they know they can't do it, and then they will come to you for help. At which point there's a huge shift. You shift from being antagonist to a hero, because they struggled for a while. And so on the issue of help, it's a very great issue. It's true. The eagerness to help others can be harmful, right? We have to stay ready. We have to stay near. We have to trust people. We have to believe in them, let them try. But over helpfulness is destructive, if you ask me.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's a separate. We didn't focus.
Yeah, we could go off on
You
another
just gave me a writing idea. I'm gonna call it the helping paradox.
Yes, there you go. I love that.
My son, it's less of like wanting to tie a shoe, but more of like, I'm going to take a really sharp knife from the drawer and try to cut, vegetables on my own with my hand right in front of the knife. I'm like, come on, dude, that's a bad lesson learned right there.
Yeah. You don't want him to learn that one the hard way.
Yeah. My wife says he's going to be a great leader someday because he's so independent, and I'm crossing my fingers if that's the case. So anyway.
Hey, Dan, we're coming up. We want to honor your time. We know you got a coaching call, a coaching event here coming up, which I have to admit I'm a little bit jealous of whatever that conversation is going to be, because I know it'll be beneficial for whoever is on the other end of that line. But I just want to encourage you. Thank you so much for, I think when Stu said the bad leadership thing, it made me think of, bad leaders help us to see who we don't want to become, but good leaders inspire us to become what we desire to become. Right. And good leaders are the ones that will never forget, because of the investments they made into us and the effort they poured into us to help us to become our highest and best. And so I really appreciate the way that you do that to so many through the blog and through the, your writing and speaking, and just the way that you pour over yourself. So thank you so much. I have already, in our short time knowing each other, have feel like I know you a lot better than you know me, because I've been digging into your blogs, but I'll tell you, it is enriching. I encourage everybody to go check out Leadership Freak, and it's bite size, which is awesome. It's such quick hitting things, and it's amazing to me that you can get so much value in such a short amount of prose. So thank you for that. You're awesome.
Thank you, and thank you for the invitation. It's been a real pleasure.
Sir, well, guys and gals, go check out Leadership Freak. He's got a great blog. Hey, if you like this, share it with someone. Take a screenshot and share it on your social medias. Tag us, and we'd love to see that. Give us 5-star reviews. We'd be super happy for a 5-star review. Hey, go fill your storehouse.
Thanks, friends. Make it a great day. Thank you, Dan.
Thanks, Dan.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Filling the Storehouse. If you enjoyed our show, please subscribe and share it with someone you love. And if you really felt inspired, leave a 5-star review so we can continue to grow and help other Christian entrepreneurs fill their storehouse. If you're interested in creating financial freedom through real estate investing, be sure to check out our website at storehouse310turnkey.com. We'd love to serve you through our platform of building the kingdom. Just click on the contact link and we'll reply to you as soon as we can. Again, thanks so much for listening. Now go for your storehouse and make it a great day.